So the Harris Wallace campaign just endorsed, or I should say proposed, an increase in long-term capital gains taxes to 44% and taxing unrealized capital gains or unrealized gains at 25%. So let's break this down a little bit. So we're going to do this in two parts. So let's talk about this 44% long-term capital gains tax. So basically what that does is that takes the short-term capital gains percentage and applies it to the long-term capital gains. So what does that do? That disincentivizes people to hold long-term investments. Why? Because they're going to get taxed at the same rate as short-term investments. Historically, because investments got taxed at a lower percentage, if you held it long-term, anything over a year, that tax rate dropped down to about 25%. But now, Harris and Wallace have proposed an increase to 44%. So what happens when you increase your long-term capital gains taxes to be applicable to everyone in this country? Well, you reduce stability in the market because that removes people's incentive to hold them long-term. When you don't hold your investment long-term, it brings market volatility. When you have market volatility, you have less job growth. You have less stability in the economy. So all in all, it creates turmoil in the market. So it's just not a good thing because it reduces or it eliminates that incentive for investors to hold their investors long-term. Now, let's jump to this 25% unrealized capital gain taxes. So I'm going to put this in terms of you as a homeowner. So let's say you own a home that's worth $400,000. Now let's say over the next 12 months, your home goes up in value to $500,000. That $100,000 value increase that you just had go into your home over the last 12 months, you now owe a 25% tax on that $100,000. You haven't sold your house. You don't have any extra money in your bank. You haven't gotten a raise. You haven't done anything to get more money or more income coming in, but you still owe tax on that $100,000 increase. So what does this do? Well, one, it's going to be applicable to only those right now, or so they say, that have a value portfolio or a net worth over $100 million. However, if history dictates anything, it will soon trickle down to everyone in this country, no longer just those high income or high net worth people. So let's remove that piece of the equation for right now. Let's just assume that it's applicable to everyone in this country. That means everyone will owe every single year taxes on unrealized gains on any investment or anything that you own that is appreciated in value, whether or not you've sold it or not. However, on the flip side, let's say that 2 years go by, you have price appreciation in your home, $100,000 each year. You have now paid $50,000 across those 2 years in 25% unrealized capital gains. But let's just say your property goes down in value year 3. You don't get a refund based on the devaluation of that property. So you have paid your capital gains taxes on that unrealized appreciation, but you get no refund back at all. And look, let's be honest. I'm going to call bad policy when I see it. And honestly, in my opinion, what this is that campaign, that presidential candidate trying to buy votes from uneducated or ill-informed or even misinformed middle-class voters that somehow have believed the picture that the Democrats paint, that high net worth or those that have a high income somehow don't pay their fair share. It's just bad policy. It's going to ultimately result in a poor economy, an unstable economy, and a very volatile economy on top of it all. So let's talk about the Harris Wallace $25,000 first-time home buyer grant, whatever they're calling it, that they want to give everyone that wants to buy a home. Now, I know a lot of people got all excited for this when it first came out. They're like, oh, I can buy a home now. But I'm going to relate this to what the current market is right now so you can kind of get an understanding of why it's actually a really, really bad thing. One, where's that $25,000 coming from? Well, it's coming from taxpayers. So it's our taxpayer money that's going to be funding those grants that she wants to give. Two, we are and have been and are still in a supply and demand market when it comes to real estate. What do I mean by that? Well, I've talked about it in other videos, and I'm going to kind of break it down for you again right now so you understand before we talk about this a little bit more. We've been in the supply and demand market for the last 5 or 6 years. And basically what that means is that we have more demand from home buyers than we do supply on the market. What's that done? Well, that's ultimately driven prices up in homes that are out there on the market because you have a number of buyers competing for the same home on the market. Now, interest rates have climbed, and that's dropped affordability for some, which has dropped demand some. However, there's still more demand, even at 7 and 8% interest rates, than there are with the number of homes on the market. What happens when you bring in even more demand? Because now all these first-time home buyers can now afford to buy a home because they've been given this $25,000 grant, or whatever you want to call it, and you bring more demand into the market all at once, but there is no more supply. What's that going to do? Just like it did before, it's going to drive real estate prices up through the roof. Now, for me as an investor, I love it because that just means my portfolio value goes up. However, from an economy standpoint, from a real estate industry standpoint, from a home buyer standpoint, from an American dream standpoint, it's actually a really, really bad thing because we're not going to have an influx of new inventory to accommodate that new number of buyers that now all of a sudden can afford to buy a house. So you have even more buyers, more demand, but the same number of houses, and that's going to drive prices up even more. So instead of having 5 buyers for every one house, you now have 10, 12, 15 buyers for every one house that's on the market. And all that's going to do is continue to drive home prices up, thus bringing affordability down even more for home buyers in the market when Harris, or if Harris actually takes office. These policies, and I've said it before, are just policies that they like to tease people with to basically buy their votes. In the grand scheme of economics, in the grand scheme of the real estate industry, in the grand scheme of the American dream, they're really bad policies to put in play because most people aren't thinking about the end result that's going to come from this that I have just outlined and described. And I can guarantee you, if this actually happens, what you're going to see is real estate prices go through the roof once again, like they did during 2020, 2021, 2022, because the number of home buyers out there that can now afford a home increases, but the supply has not.